So the upcoming release of the Steam Machine, Steam Frame, and Steam Controller, I think is going to be a potentially huge game changer. And it's not just on the gaming industry, but I just think the whole entire computing industry as a whole, specifically when it comes to the operating system that runs the vast majority of devices that we use daily. And the leader of that, or the top of all the operating systems, is still Microsoft Windows. Apple Mac has definitely made huge dents over many years. But there is one alternative that I think could shake up both of those operating systems and platforms, and that is Valve's Steam OS. So Steam OS is geared towards gaming at the beginning, but I really feel this has the potential to be our primary operating system for the vast majority of devices that we have out there. But to focus on gaming, I think there is still one big challenge that Valve has, and that's the simple fact that not all games that work on Windows works in SteamOS. Specifically, games that have anti-cheat. So that is the one thing that a lot of gamers have talked about being the main reason why they won't be switching over from Windows over to SteamOS is because they can't play some of their favorite games, things like Battlefield 6, Fortnite, or any of the other big games that have anti-cheat enabled, because those are meant to work with the Windows operating system and it goes down to the Windows kernel, whereas with Linux it's not built for that, and so people can use that to cheat, if they could bypass that security feature that they have in Windows. And so that is something that I think could be a problem for some gamers out there, and being the main reason why they won't switch over to SteamOS or have it as their main gaming system and not even consider getting a Steam Deck or a Steam machine in the future because of that. And that definitely makes sense. However, I'm going to argue that for the vast majority of people, this anti-cheat issue isn't going to be a big problem, and I feel that there will be a fix in the future, and I'll talk about that later in the video. So let's go ahead and talk about where we're currently at with SteamOS and compatibility in gaming. So if you didn't know, Steam Deck runs on SteamOS, and all the machines that are coming later also run on SteamOS. So SteamOS is a Linux-based operating system. It's Arch Linux, whereas the vast majority of all the games were built on the Windows operating system. So with ProtonDB, this is a compatibility layer that allows you to play Windows games that weren't made for Linux on your Linux operating system. So I have here my Steam games. These are all Windows. I think there's only a few that were natively made to work with Linux, but it's probably like 1% or even less than that. And so this has really completely changed the whole gaming world, at least for people who run Linux, because previous to this, we were using things like Wine, and ProtonDB is an extension of the Wine project, but nobody has done as much work with ProtonDB and with Wine and all those other things than Valve has. Obviously this was an open source project, so this work was started a long time ago, which all of us people who play games on Linux are very grateful for, but it wasn't until Valve got involved specifically for the Steam Deck that things really changed, because, well, Valve has the money to put into this to further the development of this. And so because of that, a lot of Linux gamers like myself are really happy, and now we don't have to just use Windows. However, for people who want to play all their Windows games in SteamOS, that's not quite there yet. But more and more games are becoming compatible with SteamOS. So there is a website called ProtonDB, and this keeps track of the games that actually work on the Steam Deck and hence SteamOS. So there's Deck verified games. So Steam Deck verified games. Verified is 7,186. Verified or playable 23,678. And then games on ProtonDB, there's a lot here. So basically, you got like 20,000 plus games that are verified or playable. Verified means that they work like 100%, and 10% of those, they are meant to work on a Steam Deck, but 30% are playable. So if you look on here, even just 7,000 plus games, that is a ton of games. And for people who might not be switching over because of the fact that some of their favorite games don't work because of anti-cheat, I think that's a very, very small percentage of games. And so if you're wondering like how many games, well, let's just assume that, let's just say, yeah, like 20,000, maybe to 10,000, of games work on here. And out of those, how many don't work with anti-cheat? Well, there's a website called Are We Anti-Cheat Yet? So this keeps track of games and their statuses of working, like things like Battlefield up to Battlefield 6. They all don't work, and Fortnite doesn't work. But you could also look at games that do work as well, and there's quite a bit. So here's the supported, and that's some stats right here. So 194 supported. So out of the 1,136 games that have anti-cheat, 258 are running, 23%, 2% planned, 635 are broken, so 56%, and 47% denied, complete, don't work. There's only 4%. So let's assume that, about 1,000, let's just say that, because 194 work supported. Running means like they might work or they might not work. So about 1,000 of these don't work. That is a lot, but if you actually look at the total number of games that are working or playable, that's not a huge percentage. That's like what, like 2%. So yeah, that's like less than 10%. Okay, it's not even 20% of all the games that are currently verified or playable on Steam Deck and hence SteamOS. And when you look at how many games are here, this trounces all the other amount of games that are on other consoles, right? That is a ton of games. And so that is the first thing. The total percentage of games, anti-cheat games that aren't working, is not a big of a percentage as you might think. And at the same time, more and more of these games are becoming supported over time, and more games are being supported or compatible with SteamOS as it matures and more people use this operating system. And I think the Steam Machine is really going to push that even further. And obviously, Windows 11 or Windows in general, they are still the one that is the most compatible because games are meant to work with this. But over time, this whole advantage is going to continually shrink, and less people are going to be using Windows as their main gaming platform if most of the games now work in Steam through SteamOS. And that is going to be a huge thing, which leads me to the fix for anti-cheat that I was talking about. So the fix is, as more and more people buy these Steam machines, pay for Steam service, game on their platform, then the money is actually gonna maybe force some of these companies like EA that don't have anti-cheat for Linux, well, they're gonna change, because if more and more people are gonna be spending money, there's more eyeballs on this other platform, then, well, money talks. And that's why I feel that the fix will be coming as more and more people play games through Steam machines and hence SteamOS through Steam Deck and all their other devices. And when you have more people on these platforms, that's obviously potentially more money for these gaming companies and tech companies. So those are my thoughts on SteamOS, anti-cheat, and the potential fix that could come. And it all comes down to money. And hopefully we'll get way more games that are compatible. And a lot of these anti-cheat games, which previously were denied, will become supported later on. So if you actually had any thoughts on this, be sure to leave in the comments area below. And I'll see you on another episode.